what people need to understand, and I'll give a little bit of an overview of how I see the Shoalhaven economy and how it's sort of made up. And that'll help the context of what I talk about later, is that there's really three sectors within the Shoalhaven economy. You've got, especially here in the north, those businesses and government services that are really not impacted directly by COVID. The staffing adjustments have been made, but these businesses are operating at 100%. Some of them are operating at 110% or even more. And the logistics operators I talked to have said that their trucks have never been busier. So it's sort of business as usual there. The government sector, and we've got a fair amount of government sector employees with Navy, corrections or justice, with the council and other government agencies like health, education and whatever. They make up probably, and you throw in there the Sikorskis and the Manildras, you're really up about 1/3 of the employment of the whole of the Shoalhaven is in that sort of group, and they're getting paid. Now, it's better for our economy if they're paid by the state and the Australian governments, and so that's money coming into our economy and injecting into our economy. So that's one group, and I see that operating quite well. The southern economy around Ulladulla, the Sussexes and those places, it's more a service economy, and they have taken a shock. You know, they've taken both the bushfires and COVID, and I think they're lacking in confidence. I think there's a degree of rebuild to happen in those economies, and it's all around local confidence, getting on with the job, seeing things happen, and and I'm confident that that'll bounce back. And maybe some losses down there in will be okay. The ones on the coast and into the coast.
Just pausing there for a minute, Greg. Anna, I'm wondering if we should get the videos turned off because Greg's stuttering on my screen.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so if we can get
also showing Kangaroo Valley and Berry
to turn their videos off, please, so we can ensure we can hear Greg. Thank you.
Back to you, Greg.
Right. So, so that coastal visitor economy, it's always fragile. And over the years that I've been here, we've had algal blooms in Jervis Bay, we've had fires, we've had inclement weather for 2 or 3 weeks in January, and they've always affected that economy. So, it's an economy. I know they do well. They try and get at least 50 to 70% of their trade in that 10 weeks or so when the tourists are here. But that also leaves them volatile, vulnerable in if they don't get a good season, they're in trouble, and they haven't had that. I think that they will recover because I don't think the overseas travel will be an option for many people. So domestic tourism will be the way to go. What I just fear is that we get another outbreak of COVID and we go back into lockdown. And if that happens running up to the Christmas and whatever, what will that do to that economy? And I fear a little bit for that, but we've got to be positive and hope that they will work that through.
Well, it's interesting. Bernard Salt says that this crisis has caused a tectonic shift in our work habits. Before, only 1 in 20 worked from home, and now 98% of us seem to be working from home at the moment. When we look back in 12 months' time, do you think we'll see that work habits in the Shoalhaven have been radically and permanently changed?
I think they will. I think there's some of the private enterprises, especially in the IT area, have been doing this for many years. They work from home or work from remote locations, and I've even got one son who was operating from a home in Kinghorn Street and was reporting to a business in Denver. So he's now since moved to Denver, but that has been on, and I think now it's really about leadership. Those people in the IT industry were really not really fearing of what the computer and the internet could do, so they allowed that to happen. I think the more traditional businesses and the government agencies and whatever, they're more restrictive, and they basically traditional. Everybody comes in together. You all clock on. You all do your work and clock off and go home again. But I think this has shown that we can actually work remotely. I've got a team of 3 others and myself, and we haven't been into the office for 7 weeks. So we can do it. It's amazing. Some of your colleagues that are sending your emails at 10:30 at night or 5 o'clock in the morning. And when I talk to some of those, they're working around family requirements. These kids, especially those with children, younger children, they've got to get those off to school and so on. And they're adapting, and they're adapting around.
If that be the case, and if we're working differently and we're shopping online and doing that differently, what are you seeing that's giving hope to the local retail sector?
Well, just before I go to the retail sector, where I see an opportunity for the Shoalhaven and other regional areas of Australia is that those people, especially those if we've got good connectivity, will be able to leave their Sydney or Parramatta offices and work from Culburra and log in, maybe go into the office 1 day a week, and be able to do that. And I think we'll see more of that happening. And so we may see over the next few years more people decentralising into regional areas, and there'll be a push for that. There's also some noise being created at the moment to make that position aware to employers and also to employees to consider that. So,
but if foot traffic is still king, and if we've discovered digital banking and eBay and postal, even I've done some of those things, how are we going to give hope to our retail sector?
Well, I think the retail sector is the one that's having to adjust, and we can all see that the supermarkets are going gangbusters, but the other shops where it's discretionary spending, they're not getting the passing traffic because people are not holidaying in the area, they're not at work and wandering up the street at lunchtime. That is the sector that I think is going to have to adjust. Now, that's been adjusting over the years, and we've had the vacancies in the shops and in the main streets, and everybody's been grappling with that question of how to revitalise and put more foot traffic in. But it's a worldwide problem. No matter where you are in the world, you've got that exact same problem. You've got vacant shops, you've got retailers without patrons going in, and can they keep existing in that format? I think there is a change, and it's even going to happen in the big supermarket, in big shopping centres like the Shellharbour Squares and the Miranda Fairs and those sorts of places. I think they're going to get, it'll be the national chains that'll be in there. You won't be there, your specialty shops.
Which is interesting because the figures are showing, I don't know if it's nationally or state, that the hardware and garden supply purchases surged 17% through the month of, I think it was March, but if not March, April. Electrical items spending grew about 11.3%. So are we seeing some of that sort of activity as well down here in the Shoalhaven?
Well, I think this is the lifestyle change that people are taking advantage of doing their work, taking a meal break at about 12 o'clock and maybe till 2 o'clock, going out the backyard, doing a bit of gardening and that sort of thing. And that's what's generating that sort of expenditure. I know I especially with going into winter, I work here in the home office. I then go outside, and it's great to have lunch out in the sun on the back deck, soak up the rays into the bones, and you feel as though you're ready to go again. But so I think there's going to be more of that and that adjustment, and providing that the employers adapt to the fact that their workers are not going to be there 9 to 5. They're going to be there and do their work day, but over different hours. And does that make them then want to go into town and do a walk around the shops at 1 o'clock? I'm not sure about that, whether they'll
It could flip, that could flip the habits, I suppose. I've still been going in to get a cup of coffee at the cafe that I get my coffee from, and partly my reasoning for that is that I'm giving support to the business that was there. But I think you're right. It's also getting me out of my own house, because I get up in the morning, walk into this room, and I can be here at 6:30 at night. So if I hadn't gone down for a coffee, I wouldn't have left the house.
Yeah,
well, a change of habits might actually be a help.
And also, I think on probably another example where I go out and see something in the garden or see something around the house, so I then go and fix it. Whereas, because you haven't got to be back in 10 minutes time for a meeting or whatever. If you've got a bit of a flexible time in the middle of the day, you can do those adjustments. If it means going to a hardware shop and buying some plants or buying some whatever, you can do that. And I think that's what people are seeing as their need and their lifestyle need at the moment. I'm not quite sure that the haberdashers and those sorts of businesses are getting the custom, and because they're not getting the people getting the people who want to go there and buy a certain item, but they're not getting the people who just want to browse to kill an hour during their lunch break.
So what are the things that the tourist industry are doing to take advantage of the expected local tourism boom that we're hoping will follow?
Well, I think there is these programs to spend more here, and those sorts of programs to get the locals to buy locally. And we're talking to Ulladulla about another one of those programs probably today. So it's those sorts of practices that will drag more custom through their shops, and the business traders putting on specials or whatever to sucker the people in. Then once you've got them in the shop, well, then, because that's the way the big boys play it. So I think there's going to be more of that having to be done. The tourism people have geared up several times to bring more people down, but then they come up out of the fire with a program like that, and then COVID shut them down. So I think they've been burnt a couple of times now, so they'll progress cautiously in that regard, because the government has put this strict curfew on everybody. That's now being loosened up. We're going to see what happens over the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. If we get cells of infection, that might then close it down, or might close regions down. How they're going to react to that, and that will destroy the confidence again, so people will stay home. And so it is basically a confidence thing.
It may destroy their confidence to want to go to the places where there's an outbreak, but I've got a sense there's a lot of pent-up excitement about the idea of getting out. What I want to ask you is about the government offsets and subsidies and all the support that's being given. Do you see that that'll have an impact to soften the decline in this area?
I think economically, I did some projections back in February, early March, but at that stage there was no talk about JobKeeper and all these programs, and so I had a fairly pessimistic view of what was going to happen, and it was actually quite frightening. Unemployment in the mid-20s and 20% and those sorts of things. But now that we can assess those, the JobKeeper and a lot of those sorts of programs that have now kicked in, even the $10,000 assistance to business, one in 3 businesses in the Shoalhaven have been able to secure that $10,000 grant to help them work through and plan their future. I'm now of the opinion that Shoalhaven probably won't be as affected as a lot of other places because of our robust economy in the north, in the northern end of it. But I think our economic output will fall by about $250 million, or 2.2%.
2.2%. You're not saying 20%.
No, I'm not paying 20%. Employment will fall by about 2,800 from those that were employed in December. And I see unemployment rates getting to 16, 17, 18% when the numbers come out mid-year for about the June quarter. But it depends. We still don't know, and the government hasn't released these stats, how many people in the Shoalhaven have applied for and been successful with JobKeeper. I know that I'm talking to some that are, but there's others that haven't bothered to do it. They really couldn't either prove their 40% downturn in the economy. But loss in wages, and so this is really the spending power, will drop by about 3.5%, about $95 to $100 million. So,
which in the scheme of what we're hearing is not as dramatically different, and we're going to survive that. That's, I mean, I keep drawing and telling people about my experience from the 1991 recession, and I know that we got over that. You know, there was a really grisly point, but we then gradually got out of it. So I tell that story so that people can see that, you know, this isn't the end of the world type stuff. There's a way out of this.
Yeah, we're getting close to time here, but I can see that, and I agree with the national economists that the economy of Australia will decline by about 7 to 8%.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the Shoalhaven will have that much of a decline. I think about 70 to 80% of our local businesses, our bigger businesses, and our are working to capacity. Even the construction industry seems to be recovered and going. Even the cottage industry side of it is working. So I think a fall of 2 to 3 to 4%, somewhere in that range, is what we'll experience. The government offsets will subsidise those downturns that we will experience. So the government is injecting lots of money into this economy, and that's the state and federal government and councils doing its bit as well. So I think there's that will help. The big question is, what are we going to do with the debt?
Well, the other question is, given that we've just about run out of time, you're going to come back in 12 months' time and we can review what your crystal ball has been able to tell us and whether or not it did.
Yeah, I've put that on the bottom of a few emails that I've just said I'd like to come back. But I think the one thing that I'm suggesting that is a way forward that the government's got to look at is increasing the GST. It is a tax that affects everybody. I think in this day when the government assistance has been tried to be pushed down to pensioners, to businesses, to employees, to all sorts of the economy, we've all been supported in some form or other to get through this crisis. I think it's going to be the whole of the economy and the whole of the community that's going to have to put their shoulder to the wheel to repay the government for the cash that they've just created by way of printing presses and digital increases in balances of banks.
Well, I'll throw back to Anna on that nice point, sting in the tail for all the support we're getting. But look, thank you, Greg. This has been fun to hear your views on things. I'd be interested in hearing the good news stories as they come out. Thanks very much, Anna. I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. A couple of comments have been coming through on the chat, which has been really interesting to watch. Greg, particularly from a tourism perspective, can you just elaborate? You made some comments around that. There's been a couple of questions around what's been done, and Manda's also posted about needing to reinvigorate the arts and entertainment to help revitalise the centres. Could you make any further comments on that, Greg?
Well, I'll do the arts and that area. I think that's one area where the government hasn't been strong in their response. We're seeing that nationally, and I think there's a bit of pressure being applied to government to support that sector a little bit more. I'm not sure what will transpire over the next few months, but now that we can start bringing people together in place, there may be opportunities for government to support that sector. With regard to the tourism sector, again, I see it will work its way out. However, the big qualification I'll make there is providing that we don't have more localised or general lockdowns. That's going to see the whole thing go back to where we were, what we're coming out of now in the last 6 or so weeks. That will be to the detriment, and if it happens at the wrong time for our local economy here, as in running up to Christmas and that sort of period, there's going to be dire problems in our tourism support industries and support structures. I think we've got to hope that doesn't happen.
John's posted a comment. It was actually directed at Amanda and Nina, but I'm going to redirect it to see if you've got some comments on it, Greg. He's interested to know what the council's community engagement team have planned for the future to bring the community outside and back together. Any insights on that?
I haven't been following that. I know they're doing, because they're still working out of the bushfire areas directly, and canvassing those and seeing that those people are being looked after and have been attended to. I'm more involved in the economic and the tourism side of council's play in that space. So, but I think one of the restrictions has been that we can't bring people together. Now we can get 10 and 20 people in one place. That may then give them some opportunities, but up until it was only yesterday, we really didn't know that those rules were going to be opened up. Even the announcement that the clubs and the pubs are now able to trade, providing they can only put 10 people. Now, small pub or a small club could probably operate, but someone like our 2 or 3 big clubs in the Shoalhaven, they can't run with 10 people. I just wouldn't be able to viably operate.
Yeah, so. I picked up on that when it was, when it was announced. I couldn't see how the bigger operators were going to be able to have just 10 patrons on site. They just wouldn't even start to cover the costs of opening the doors. One comment that Judy made actually right at the beginning, which was really interesting, is so Judy Bliss from the Conveyancing, was that she's got a couple of clients that are actually moving down to Sydney and still holding jobs in Sydney, but working remotely from the Shoalhaven. Have you heard of much of that going on?
I think that's going to be the interesting part over the next 18 months to 2 years. That will be probably where we'll see some growth as employers loosen up and say, well, yes, you can do this. And they negotiate that. They trial it, they come down here, they trial it from down here, either in their holiday home or whatever, and then convince, I think we'll see people moving and bringing their job with them. The big thing that's always been against that in the past is if you're in a place where you want your current employer is satisfactory, but you may want to choose someone else, you're best being located so you can be flexible and do that. Now, whether that'll extend to this working from home environment, that'll be interesting to see how all that unfolds. The IT people do it all the time. So, yeah.
Have you got? Judy's just posted a comment. So to allow that or to encourage that, is there any comments on the NBN being across the whole of the Shoalhaven to support that kind of movement?
I'm probably one of the fortunate ones. I've got fibre to the home, but so it's those different degrees of connectivity and bandwidth, and that's one of the things that out of the bushfires and out of this, government's going to have to take a grip on that and look at this telecommunications and bandwidth connectivity issue, because if we are going to do this into the future, yes, it will be areas that do have better connectivity that will be the places where people will move to. Now, we are fortunate in that Nowra does have reasonable connectivity, but as it extends out further, it's not as good. Well, a lot of it's on wireless, some of it's fibre to the curb, and some of those have, we've all been in these platforms where some people have logged on and they drop out. And it's amazing to see how many people here today have gone out or have dropped out, or they're having to not use the video side of it to make it more available in bandwidth.
So just to conclude, because we have reached our time, is there anything that you'd like to have as a end comment, Greg, on a bit of a positivity note?
As I said at the start, I think generally the Shoalhaven economy will come out of this well, especially where the major employment and the wealth of the area in those bigger industries, government departments and those sorts of things, they will go well. There's the logistics industry will be going well, but we've got a couple of sectors that really depend on that visitor economy that will struggle. Because I think business advisors and accountants and a lot of those people online here today, they've probably never seen it busier because their clients want to know what's JobKeeper all about, how do I make it work, and those sorts of things. So, now whether they're getting paid for that or just doing pro bono work to keep their clients happy, I'm not sure. But
or building goodwill.
Or building goodwill, yeah. And I think
leave it at that, sorry.
Good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to both Grant and Greg for this morning's insights. Just confirming our next Breakfast Bite will be on May the 28th. The same time, we'll have the log on available from 7:30 if a couple of us would like to just connect. We had a little bit of good banter going on before we got into the interview. The next session, we have our SPBA member and local engineering consultant, Andrew Trewin, who's going to be interviewing John Lamont, Managing Director of Nowcam, major employer in the Shoalhaven. We're going to be hearing about the story of how John's business has adapted and evolved very rapidly, hey John, in response to the current market conditions. So 2 weeks from now, tune in, guys. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Have a great day.